Welcome to Venture in the South. These are the stories of innovation and success in the southern U.S. that make money, have fun, and do good.
Welcome back to Venture in the South, a podcast about angel investing and startup companies, usually in the southeastern United States. In this case, I have a guest this week. I'm your host, Paul, by the way. This week, I have a guest, Leigh Hsu, who is the CEO of a company based here in the southeast, but is currently himself in San Diego. So we're taking a national approach to angel investing today and welcoming Leigh to the show. Leigh, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Paul. It's a pleasure to be here, and I appreciate the invitation.
Yeah, I'm very happy to have you on. Thank you for taking the time to do this. Maybe we'll start things off, and maybe you can give us a little bit of background about why you are a southeastern entrepreneur, but is also in San Diego.
Okay, no, absolutely. It's a bit of a long story, but I'll give you the abridged version. Atticus is actually a spinout of a company based in Greenville called Zylo Therapeutics. And the CEO of Zylo, Scott Pancoast, and I, we worked together many, many years ago here at a company in San Diego called LPath. And so Scott had relocated to Greenville, given his sort of biotech roots, pulled some technology out of Albert Einstein College of Medicine and created Zylo. He was at it and continues to be at it for a number of years. And he realized, though, that he was also pursuing pharma. So there were a number of verticals associated with his company: animal health, agriculture, cosmetics, and he was trying to do pharma. And he realized that pharma is a much different vertical than the other three. It's a different sort of mindset. It's a different development timeline. Investment thesis. And so he called me up and he said, hey, we're considering doing a spin out of the pharma applications of our technology. Is this something that you would be interested in doing? And so I took a look at some of the data that had been generated already, and I was very impressed. I was like, wow, you guys have accomplished a lot, but it's at the very start of the journey. And to develop a pharmaceutical, people like to say it costs $1 billion in 10 years, which is kind of a crazy thing to wrap your arms around. But it is much different from the other verticals. And he said, you're a biotech guy. Would you be interested in taking this on? And like I said, given the initial set of data being so promising, I thought, wow, okay, let's give it a go. And so we took steps to spin out Atticus. And I'm still in San Diego and managed to attract one of our previous colleagues as well as our chief medical officer to join us, and we're making a go of it. But, as you mentioned, we are definitely bi-coastal. And I know that one of the questions that you were going to ask me was, how is it that you're finding managing a company that's, in two different locations? And I'm going to give you the punchline, Paul. I think it's fantastic because I feel actually very privileged because I can get the best of both worlds. Quite honestly, I've been so impressed with the growing biotech ecosystem in the Southeast and South Carolina in particular, actually. And there's support from policymakers, there's support from groups like yours, there's support from the scientific community. It's really growing, and I can tell that there's like this groundswell of people that really want to build biotech in South Carolina, SCRA, SC Bio, all of these groups. And so I'm so happy to be able to tap into that. At the same time, we all know that San Diego and the San Francisco, Boston, those are the main sort of traditional biotech hubs in the country. Established venture community, established academic institutions, all that sort of thing. And so I really truly feel blessed that I can benefit from both. But anyway, that's an answer to your question: is how is it that we're structured the way we are?
No, great. There's a lot of history you unpack there, and definitely see the advantages of taking the best parts of both those locations to give you the best chance of success. I'm curious, though, so a bit more on your background. So why are you the guy that somebody would call when there's a biotech company that needs a CEO? What did you do in the past that brought you to being able to do that?
Well, I hope I'm qualified, Paul. I'm very grateful that people have faith in me. I have a PhD in molecular pathology from UC San Diego. I spent a number of years there, published a lot of papers. I was a science guy. And then many, many years ago, this was close to 30 years ago, I went to business school. So 1 week after I defended my PhD thesis, I actually went to business school at Irvine, UC Irvine. And I knew that I wanted to go into the biotech industry. And I knew that I always tell people one of the insights that I'm proud of way back when I was young and knew nothing was that I realized that biotech companies, they're businesses, and science is a component of it. But if the business doesn't survive, then the science will die. And I knew back then that I didn't know anything about business. And so I decided, hey, I'm going to go get an MBA. And back then, people doing something like this were very odd. People thought I was a real oddball back then. And as I started my career in biotech, I actually realized that it was very valuable because I was doing business development. I focused my entire career on business development. And what that means, people generally think, oh, that's a sales job. Kind of, sorta. For a biotech company, I think everybody is always in kind of sell/advertising mode. You want to talk about your technology, but what I was responsible for was collaborations and partnerships, contracts, licensing, those types of things. So I would spend my days talking to the Pfizers and the GSKs of the world, and we would be doing deals. Be doing collaborations. In addition to that, it wasn't just pharma, it was research institutes, it was academic groups, those types of things, because, biotech is so complicated. You cannot be a master of everything. You have to collaborate. We depend on collaborations. And for that matter, pharma depends on collaborations. And so that's really what I spent my entire career doing. As part of that, it was still very multidisciplinary. I needed to understand what our scientists were doing. I needed to understand what our clinical development pathway was. I needed to understand what our IP landscape was. How competitive could we be, right? And ultimately, you get to the point where you're going to be actually commercializing a product. You need to understand whether your product is going to make it in the market, right? And so I feel very fortunate that by hook or by crook, I ended up doing business development, and I think that positioned me fairly well to do what I'm doing. I hope
Okay.
other people think that too.
Well, I mean, they clearly do because you're the CEO of the spin out. So there's definitely a few people that have good faith in you. Um, Listeners probably are fairly familiar with the Zylo story because we've had Scott and Zylo on the show before. But maybe could you just recap for us what the underpinning technology is that you are using, and then tell us a bit about what the pharma applications of that could be?
Sure, sure. We are using a technology that enables sustained delivery of drugs to the epidermal layer. So what that means is we can deliver drugs to the layer of the skin. Is you have a stratum corneum, and then you have the epidermis, and then you have the dermis. Okay. So we can deliver drugs over the course of hours to days to that layer of skin. The reason why I specify that is because a lot of immunoderm diseases that we're focusing on and that you may have heard of include psoriasis, atopic dermatitis, urticaria, hidradenitis suppurativa. These diseases all involve disruptions of the epidermis, okay? And so you would think that intuitively, it just has to make sense that if you are able to deliver a drug locally, directly to that site of disruption, it should be a good thing. All right. And so what we're doing is we can deliver small molecules, we can deliver biologics, we can deliver siRNAs. And so we're using that technology platform to develop therapeutics. So Atticus itself is a therapeutics company. We have two product candidates in development, one for cutaneous lupus and one for androgenic alopecia. But we are using this technology that came out of Albert Einstein College of Medicine to deliver our drugs to the epidermal layer.
Okay, got it. And so, how did you pick those two as the first applications that you were going to tackle?
It was largely based on preclinical data, right? So for our cutaneous lupus program, we actually have very, very nice data from multiple animal models of lupus where we show that these animals actually they develop these horrible skin lesions. And I mean, they have other symptoms as well that are reminiscent of what you would see in a lupus condition. But we're obviously focused on the skin manifestations. And so we're able to show that when we deliver our compound with the Z pods, we are able to essentially, I don't want to say cure, but treat these lesions. We see improvements in skin score, histology score. We see improvements in markers of inflammation. And if you look at these animals, the skin histologically, you see improvements. And so we have data like this from multiple animal models of cutaneous lupus. And so that's one very compelling reason. The other reason why is there's actually a real high unmet need in cutaneous lupus. So lupus, as you know, is a very complex disease. People that have these cutaneous manifestations, they get these lesions on their face, their chest, their arms. It's very debilitating. People that have this condition, they can't go out into the sun. If you see them out in the sun in the middle of summer, they're wearing long sleeves, gloves, a big wide brimmed hat. It's exacerbated by UV light. They're itchy, they're very patchy, they're scaly, and so it's a huge quality of life issue for these patients. So that's one of the reasons why we're in that space. With our other product candidate, that's based on science as well, some in vitro science as well, where the person who discovered our compound, he actually was interested in mitochondrial science, and he screened a library of 14,000 compounds. And he came across these two compounds that were most active. So with our compound that we call Y200, if you look at this molecule in vitro in a dish, you will see upregulation of mitochondrial DNA synthesis. You'll see upregulation of mitochondrial enzyme activity. And the interesting thing is, again, if you look at animal models where mitochondrial activity is compromised, these animals, they don't do well. They don't live, to full term and that kind of thing. But phenotypically, they actually have very wrinkled skin and they have alopecia. So, it's really based on science. So we thought, okay, well, this is actually a good opportunity. And again, if you think about alopecia, the market for alopecia, right? It's thought that 25% of human beings walking around on planet Earth have alopecia, which is quite remarkable. And the market opportunity is kind of strange because I've been in the industry for so long. Nobody ever really talked about alopecia as an indication. They all thought, oh, that's whatever, that's Rogaine, that's, herbals and botanicals and snake oil and all sorts of strange things. But very interestingly, in the past 2 years, there have been 3 approvals for a condition called alopecia areata, which is a different type of alopecia. It's immune-mediated alopecia. But the end result is that you want to grow more hair. And so now you've got companies like Pfizer and Eli Lilly that actually are marketing an alopecia areata drug. And so I think that, the science has evolved. I think companies have realized, hey, 25% of people on planet Earth have alopecia, 80 million Americans, 30 million of which are women who suffer from this condition. And so from the market perspective, also, I think that it's something that's become much more prominent.
Okay, got it. So a combination of large potential markets, unmet need, and some initial science that says this actually does have a positive impact on those unmet needs. So just to be clear, are you developing new ingredients and putting them into your technology? Or are you taking existing ingredients and just delivering them better because of the technology that you have?
That's an excellent question. The answer to your question is we're doing new ingredients. These are new chemical entities, but what you're alluding to is an opportunity there as well. So, for example, there are drugs out there that let's talk about psoriasis, okay? And people are very interested in developing new drugs for psoriasis. It's a huge opportunity. There's 7 million Americans that have psoriasis. There are good drugs out there. There are big blockbuster drugs out there that actually do a fairly good job, but there are opportunities for new entrants. And so what we could do is we could take a drug that might have been developed for systemic administration, an injectable or maybe an oral, that may have not done so well for whatever reason. It could have fallen out of development because of safety. It could have fallen out of development because lack of efficacy. And we could put it into our Z-Pods and deliver it directly to the site of the lesion. And so you can imagine that if you were to inject a drug that you want ultimately to go to the epidermis, it's got to go through the bloodstream, it's got to make its way through the body and actually end up at the site of the psoriatic plaque. If you take a pill, it's got to go through your gut. You've got first pass metabolism. It could get taken out by the liver, and it's got to go and make its way to the psoriatic plaque.
Mhm.
Whereas what we are doing is we are saying, okay, let's take that drug, put it in our technology, boom, put it right here, and it's right at the site of action. And on top of that, we have this notion of the sustained release. So we're essentially creating a depot of drug at the site of action that will release drug over time.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like there's a massive back catalog of failed attempts that you could now solve because you can get the drug into the right place in the right concentrations over a sustained release. Feels like there's a huge potential to go back and revisit things that didn't work, should have worked but didn't because of that delivery challenge. But you're also developing your own novel ingredients at the same time. So you have a lot of potential ways you could have decided to go forward, but the novel ingredients was the most appealing route in your evaluation, I guess.
It is, and you're hinting at something that I think many of us sort of think about. We'd like to do more, but you have to resource these things,
Yeah,
right?
right.
So I can tell you that, we talked about the two product candidates that we're working on, but we have others in our pipeline. Kind of a kind of an interesting one is that we've got some animal data on, which is topical Viagra, topical sildenafil. People take this oral pill for erectile dysfunction, and many men actually don't refill their prescriptions because of the side effects. Redness, flushing, those types of things. They don't like it. So, I mean, there's an opportunity there for a topical sildenafil, and we have some animal data there. We'd love to pursue things like that, but we need to resource the company, and we do need to prioritize.
Yeah, there's only so much time and only so much money available for early companies to go do what they want to do. I guess while we're talking about that, one of those is government funding for these kinds of things has been interrupted or more challenging recently. Has that affected you in the recent past?
I wish the answer was no, but unfortunately, the answer is yes. I think that many small companies, we rely on SBIRs and STTRs to get projects off the ground and actually advance to the point where you can actually be in the clinic. I can tell you that we continue to submit grants, but we've had grants where we've got good scores and they haven't been funded, where historically grants with that score have been funded very easily. It used to be the case that, there was the valley of death in biotech, product development, right? Now it's moved earlier, and people used to use those SBIRs, STTRs to fund these things, and those are becoming more difficult to come by as well. I'm not sure what the alternative is. We will continue to do these. We've actually submitted one very recently. It's a $2 million grant. It's going to be discussed next month, and hopefully we'll get a good score, and hopefully, knock on wood, it's going to be funded because many of those funds, we are planning to use for our IND enabling studies for our cutaneous lupus program. So I wish I had a better answer, more positive answer for you, but unfortunately, the answer is we are affected.
Yeah, right. Well, I think it's the reality for everybody. You're not the only people affected. Lots of people are, and something the industry as a whole is grappling with. Maybe let's spin to a more positive view, assuming that some of those problems can get solved. What is ultimately the vision for Atticus? Is it a technology platform company, or is it a therapeutic or two that you sell that main blockbuster therapeutic for?
Long-term vision for Atticus is, it would be unrealistic for a small company like ours to think about building a commercial infrastructure. The resources required for something like that are just too great. Now, I won't say that that's never going to happen, but we need to get some successes with our initial product candidates and ultimately get those to commercialize in conjunction with a partner. So we'll get them to the point where we have probably human proof of concept, and then we will be partnering those with a company that has that commercial infrastructure that we will draw on. We'll do a deal with them. Presumably, it's going to include upfront payments, development and sales milestones, payments to us, and then also a royalty on sales. And we'll grow the company that way. But like I said, at this point in time, to think about building a commercial infrastructure is not something that keeps me up at night.
Yeah, I meant more along the lines of do you think that the whole company gets acquired at the point where you have the first one or two drugs at that point where you hit those milestones? Or do you want to keep the the topical delivery technology separate to commercialize a string of or to develop but not yet commercialized, but to develop a string of potential technologies going forward?
I think it's a little bit too early to say for sure, Paul, but what you're hinting at also is something that, let me answer it this way, okay? We would do a deal on one of our product candidates, but I see a lot of value to our platform. And I would think that another company who would want one of our product candidates would also see a lot of value to our platform.
That is what I was hinting at. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
And so if I am a big pharma on the other side of the table, and they say, yeah, we've got a franchise in alopecia, we want to do a deal on your alopecia program, but hey, by the way, we know all the stuff that you're talking about, all the disruptions of the epidermal layer. We know that 20 to 30 million Americans suffer from atopic dermatitis. We know that you can deliver drugs to this region in a sustained release manner. We don't know of any other company that can do this. If I were they, right, I would probably think about, hey, maybe it's just better for us to take out the whole company. But what I would say to you, Paul, is, our sort of thesis is that in 2 years, we will get 2 human proof of concept data sets. And that's actually quite remarkable that we can do that in 2 years.
Yeah.
And
Right.
at that point, that's where the real sort of value inflection point in biotech is, because I always say, you can show data in a cell culture dish, and there's a lot of value there. There's more value when you show that you have activity in an animal model of disease. There's value there. But the big value is when you can show that you have an effect in the human condition. And so we're going to have 2 of these data sets in 2 years. And at that point, at that level of sort of the value inflection point, that's when something can happen. Is it an M&A? Is it a big pharma partnership? Is it an IPO? That's where I think that the opportunities really will be available to you.
Okay. Got it. That is unusual, as you say, to have 2 human data sets in such a short space of time. Do you see there's any risk to that being possible? I mean, I feel like there are plenty of patients with both of those diseases, and therefore it's probably fairly easy to find the clinical trialees. But is that a fair assumption, or are you actually worried about that?
Well, I'm always worried about stuff like that, though, Paul,
Yeah.
because biotech development is risky, right? It's always risky. I mean, from every angle, whether you're an operator, whether you're an investor. I mean, people that are investing in biotech, they have to realize it's a high risk, but it's a very high potential return, right? But to answer your question, I'm very confident. Everything that we've seen so far shows that we have activity, shows that we are well tolerated, shows that it's safe, shows that we don't have any systemic toxicity or things like that. But we have to do all of the studies. So to give you an example, with our cutaneous lupus program, we're kicking off all our IND enabling work, and we have to do some skin sensitization studies in mini pigs and things like that. There's always the possibility that something might take a left turn that you never anticipated. But that's why we consult with the experts and rely on people that have a lot of experience in these kinds of things.
Yeah. You have to be tolerant of risk as an angel investor. You have to be particularly open to risk as a biotech angel investor, which we at Venture South generally are not so much, because that's a niche field where some expertise is particularly valuable, and the stomach has to be particularly strong. But it is interesting that you can get through that process promptly with 2 data sets at once. That really does mitigate some of that risk that you might see as an angel investor.
Well, and one of the things that I see in biotech, which is a lot of companies have one asset, and I mentioned this earlier on in the call, where they say, okay, well, fund the entire development of this one asset, and it's going to cost 20, $30 million, and it's going to take however many years, and so they go for it, and then at the end of the day, right, they flip that card and it's negative. And then what happens? They fold up the tents and they go home. In our case, it's true. We have 2 product opportunities that are going forward. Hopefully, we have positive data for both of those. But where we're different is we have a platform as well, where we can fill pipeline for ourselves and for potential partners. So I think that sort of differentiates us a little bit from the investment perspective, right? You have more than one kick at the can. And I just don't really agree with this idea, hey, fund that single asset, everybody's all in on it, and then boom, flip the card. I don't think I'm not sure that that's good for our industry to do it that way.
Certainly is a high risk approach. We do actually have another company in the Venture South portfolio where we are doing exactly that. So fingers crossed that card does flip out the right way. And sometimes if the potential reward is huge, so if it works, it's worth it. If it doesn't, then it's not. but you can't know
I
that
hope
going
it
in.
works out. I definitely hope it works out, Paul, because then I'm going to come to you for our Series B. Okay.
Oh, I hope so too. I hope you can do that. I do like the way you tilt the odds in your favor when you can, and having a technology behind all of this is one good way to do that for sure. So let's go back a little bit to the pan US coverage that you have. So how many people do you have on the team, and where are they, and what's everybody working on?
Well, we have myself and we have our Chief Medical Officer, Dario Paggiarino. He's an MD. He's been in clinical development for over 35 years. We stopped counting at 35 years because it's more than that, but he doesn't let us say more than that. So he's very well experienced in a number of different therapeutic modalities. He's spent a lot of time in ophthalmology as well, but he's been a key person in getting our clinical programs kicked off. At the same time, we draw on some of the expertise with the Zylo guys. Andrew Dragansky, he's the inventor of the technology, and he's a super scientist, and so he supports us in a very meaningful way as well. And then we have some administrative support with Charles and with Scott. But really, what I'm so grateful for is these guys are so driven, and they're so smart, and they're so experienced, and they don't have ego. Right. And so when we have our management discussions, anything's on the table. And quite honestly, I certainly don't know everything, and anybody can comment on what anybody else is doing. Dario's got his responsibilities for our clinical programs. You know, we can all ask him questions about, why are you doing this? Is it maybe better to do it a different way? And there's no ego, and I think that I'm very grateful that we have a team that's able to operate that way.
Yeah, it's definitely a more productive and also more enjoyable environment to work in when that's the case.
Mhm.
So for the course of this year, what are the main goals you're hoping to achieve by the end of the year?
Well, we're very excited about our alopecia program. So earlier this year, we kicked off our claim substantiation clinical study. And this is a double-blind, placebo-controlled, three-arm study of 180 days in human female alopecia subjects. So we are, in fact, it's now June. So we are on track to have interim data in September. So remember, I said it's a 180-day study. We're going to take an interim look at 90 days. Hopefully, we'll see something. We may not. We may have to wait for the 180 days. But we're on track to get that interim data in September and then full data in December. So those are really big events for us. In our other program, like I said, we're kicking off our IND-enabling studies now. So hopefully, by the end of the year, we'll have data from the mini pig study, and then we'll be filing the IND early in 2026, and presumably dosing patients in the first half of 2026.
You can have some fun holidays crunching some data and evaluating some results. So that'll be fun.
Right.
One of the things that early stage investors try to claim is that they can be helpful to companies as they grow. That does seem a little bit harder to claim in the biotech field, but are there things that investors can do to help you specifically, or biotech efforts like this in general?
Introductions are always very welcome, Paul. So, for us, the fundraising environment is challenging. It goes without saying. The fundraising environment now is challenging. As you alluded to, grants are challenging. We need to resource our company, and we have more than enough projects that we want to work on. But what I would say to you, Paul, is there's a buzzword out there now with companies like ours, capital efficiency, and it should have always really been a buzzword, because we should always have been efficient with our capital, right? But it's even more pronounced now. I appreciate actually the discussions that I have with the early stage investors, because they ask questions that we generally don't think about. Actually, we're head down, let's go, let's get our programs going. So I appreciate those questions, even if they're not biotech experienced. I love to talk about what we're doing. I love to try and educate people, and so I'm happy to have those discussions. So in the case though of the early stage investors, they've put their faith in us and our team, me and our team, and I take that responsibility very seriously. So if they have questions and other perspectives, I'm happy to hear them. I want to hear them because again, we're not experts at everything.
Well, I'm not sure my questions have been all that insightful, but your answers have been very helpful for people understanding what you're working on. So hopefully listeners can come up with some other questions we can pose to you as we go along too. But thank you, Leigh, for the time today, for introducing us to what you're doing. And best of luck over the next few months with the results of these trials.
Thank you so much, Paul. I enjoyed it. Keep in touch, okay?
Will do.
Okay, take care. Bye.
Thank you for listening. Visit us at ventureinthesouth.com for a complete list of previous and future shows.